Welcome back. I am Pemberton, and this is Book 5, Part 3. The Age of the Judges darkens. We begin with the men who followed Gideon his son Abimelech, who slaughtered his own brothers to make himself a king and came to a fittingly grim end, and Jephthah, a cast-out son recalled to lead, whose victory over the Ammonites is forever shadowed by the rash vow that cost him his only daughter. Then the whole of Part 3's second half belongs to Samson, born to deliver, consecrated from the womb, and gifted with monstrous strength. We will follow all of it as Josephus tells it: the lion, the riddle, the burning fields, the 1,000 struck down, the loves that undid him, Delilah and the shorn hair, the blinding and the mill, and the last prayer between the pillars. Let us go on.
Gideon had 70 legitimate sons, because he had many wives. He also had one illegitimate son by his concubine Druma, whose name was Abimelech. After his father's death, Abimelech withdrew to Shechem, to his mother's relatives, because they belonged to that place. When he had obtained money from those among them who were notorious for many acts of injustice, he came with them to his father's house and killed all his brothers except Jotham, who had the good fortune to escape and be preserved. Abimelech then turned the government into a tyranny. He made himself lord, doing whatever he pleased instead of obeying the laws, and he acted with great severity against those who supported justice. At one time, when there was a public festival at Shechem and the whole multitude had gathered there, Jotham, his brother whose escape has already been related, went up Mount Gerizim, which overlooks the city of Shechem. He cried out loudly enough for the multitude to hear him, and they listened attentively. He asked them to consider what he was about to say. When silence was made, he said that when the trees had human voices and gathered in assembly, they asked the fig tree to rule over them. But the fig tree refused, because it was content to enjoy the honor belonging especially to the fruit it bore, and did not want an honor derived from outside itself. The trees did not abandon their plan to have a ruler, so they thought it proper to offer that honor to the vine. But when the vine was chosen, it used the same words the fig tree had used before and excused itself from accepting the government. When the olive tree did the same, the trees asked the briar to take the kingdom. The briar, a kind of wood useful for burning, promised to take the government, and to be zealous in exercising it. But then they must sit down under its shadow, and if they plotted to destroy it, the fire within it would destroy them. Jotham told them that what he had said was no laughing matter. They had received many blessings from Gideon, yet they had overlooked Abimelech when he overruled everything, joined with him in killing his brothers, and he was no better than a fire himself. After saying this, Jotham went away and lived privately in the mountains for 3 years, out of fear of Abimelech. A little while after this festival, the Shechemites repented of having killed the sons of Gideon and drove Abimelech away from both their city and their tribe. Because of this, he began planning how he might distress their city. At the season of vintage, the people were afraid to go out and gather their fruits, fearing that Abimelech would do them some harm. Now a man of authority named Gaul had come to them and was staying among them, with his armed men and his kinsmen. The Shechemites asked him to provide them a guard during their vintage. He accepted their request, and the people went out with Gaul at the head of his soldiers. They gathered their fruit safely, and when they were at supper in their several groups, they dared to curse Abimelech openly. The magistrates also laid ambushes in places around the city, caught many of Abimelech's followers, and destroyed them. Now there was a magistrate of the Shechemites named Zebul, who had entertained Abimelech. He sent messengers, and informed him how greatly Gaul had stirred up the people against him. Zebul urged Abimelech to set ambushes before the city, saying that he would persuade Gaul to go out against him, which would give Abimelech the chance to take revenge on him. Once that was done, Zebul would bring Abimelech to be reconciled with the city. So Abimelech laid ambushes and lay with them himself. Gaul was staying in the suburbs, taking little care for his own safety, and Zebul was with him. When Gaul saw armed men coming on, he told Zebul that armed men were approaching. Zebul answered that they were only the shadows of huge stones. When they came nearer, Gaul perceived the truth and said that they were not shadows, but men lying in ambush. Then Zebul said, "Did you not reproach Abimelech for cowardice? Why then do you not show how very courageous you are yourself, and go fight him?" So Gaul, thrown into disorder, joined battle with Abimelech, and some of his men fell. Then he fled into the city and took his men with him. But Zebul managed matters in the city so that he caused them to expel Gaul, accusing him of cowardice in this action against the soldiers of Abimelech. When Abimelech learned that the Shechemites were again coming out to gather their grapes, he placed ambushes before the city. As they were coming out, a third part of his army took possession of the gates, to keep the citizens from returning inside, while the rest pursued those scattered abroad. There was slaughter everywhere. When he had overthrown the city to its very foundations, because it was not able to endure a siege, and had sown its ruins with salt, he went on with his army until all the Shechemites were slain. As for those who were scattered about the country and so escaped the danger, they gathered at a certain strong rock, settled themselves on it, and prepared to build a wall around it. When Abimelech learned their intention, he prevented them. He came upon them with his forces, and laid bundles of dry wood around the place, carrying some of them himself, and by his example encouraging the soldiers to do the same. When the rock was surrounded with these bundles, they set them on fire and threw in whatever by nature caught fire most easily. A mighty flame arose, and no one could flee from the rock. Every man perished there, with their wives and children, about 1,500 men in all, and the rest were a great number also. Such was the calamity that fell on the Shechemites. People's grief on their account would have been greater than it was if they had not brought so much mischief on a man who had deserved so well of them, and if they themselves had not regarded this as punishment for that same deed. After Abimelech had frightened the Israelites by the miseries he had brought on the Shechemites, he openly seemed to desire a greater authority than he already had, and appeared to set no limit to his violence except the destruction of all. Accordingly, he marched to Thebes and took the city suddenly. There was a great tower in it, to which the whole multitude fled, and he made preparations to besiege it. But as he rushed violently near the gates, a woman threw a piece of a millstone on his head. Abimelech fell down and asked his armor-bearer to kill him, so that his death would not be thought the work of a woman. The armor-bearer did what he was ordered to do. Thus Abimelech suffered this death as punishment for the wickedness he had committed against his brothers, and for his insolent cruelty toward the Shechemites. The calamity that happened to the Shechemites was according to the prediction of Jotham. When Abimelech fell, the army with him scattered abroad and went to their own homes. Then Jair the Gileadite, of the tribe of Manasseh, took the government. He was happy in other respects also, but especially in his children, who were of good character. They were 30 in number, very skillful at riding horses, and were entrusted with the government of the cities of Gilead. Jair held the government for 22 years, died an old man, and was buried in Cammon, a city of Gilead. Now all the affairs of the Hebrews were managed uncertainly, and tended toward disorder and toward contempt for God and the laws. So the Ammonites and Philistines despised them, and laid waste the country with a great army. When they had taken all Perea, they became so insolent that they attempted to gain possession of all the rest. But the Hebrews, now corrected by the calamities they had undergone, turned to supplications to God and brought sacrifices to him, begging him not to be too severe with them, but to be moved by their prayers and cease from his anger against them. So God became more merciful to them, and was ready to assist them. When the Ammonites made an expedition into the land of Gilead, the inhabitants of the country met them at a certain mountain, but they lacked a commander. Now there was a man named Jephthah, who was powerful both because of his father's virtue and because of the army he maintained at his own expense. The Israelites therefore sent to him and begged him to come to their aid, promising him dominion over them for his whole lifetime. But he would not accept their request. He accused them because they had not helped him when he was unjustly treated openly by his brothers. They had cast him off because he did not have the same mother as the rest, but had been born of a strange mother whom his father's affection had brought among them. They had done this out of contempt for his inability to defend himself. So he had lived in the country called Gilead, and received all who came to him, from whatever place they came, and paid them wages. However, when they pressed him to accept dominion, and swore that they would grant him government over them for his whole life, he led them to war. When Jephthah had immediately taken care of their affairs, he placed his army at the city Mizpeh and sent a message to the Ammonite king, complaining of his unjust possession of their land. But that king sent back a contrary message. He complained of the departure of the Israelites from Egypt, and demanded that Jephthah leave the land of the Amorites and give it up to him as his original paternal inheritance. Jephthah returned this answer: the king did not justly complain of his ancestors concerning the land of the Amorites, and ought rather to thank them for leaving the land of the Ammonites to them, since Moses could have taken that also. Jephthah would not withdraw from their own land, which God had obtained for them, and which they had now inhabited for more than 300 years, but would fight with them over it. After giving this answer, he sent the ambassadors away. Then he prayed for victory and vowed to perform sacred offices, and if he came home safely, to offer and sacrifice whatever living creature first met him. He joined battle with the enemy, gained a great victory, and in his pursuit killed the enemy all along the way as far as the city of Minnith. Then he crossed into the land of the Ammonites, overthrew many of their cities, took their spoil, and freed his own people from the slavery they had endured for 18 years. But when Jephthah came back, he fell into a calamity in no way suited to the great actions he had done. It was his daughter who came out to meet him, and she was an only child and a virgin. At this Jephthah heavily lamented the greatness of his affliction, and blamed his daughter for being so quick to meet him, because he had vowed to sacrifice her to God. However, the action that was to befall her was not unwelcome to her, since she would die because of her father's victory and the liberty of her fellow citizens. She only asked her father to give her leave for 2 months to mourn her youth with her fellow citizens. Then she agreed that, at the time already mentioned, he might do with her according to his vow. Accordingly, when that time was over, he sacrificed his daughter as a burnt offering, making an offering that was neither in conformity with the law nor acceptable to God, without considering what opinion those who heard of such a practice would have of it. The tribe of Ephraim then fought against him, because he had not taken them with him in his expedition against the Ammonites, but had kept the spoil and the glory of what was done for himself alone. He said, first, that they were not ignorant of how his kindred had fought against him, and that when they were invited, they did not come to his assistance, though they ought to have come quickly even before they were invited. Next, he said they were acting unjustly, because while they did not have enough courage to fight their enemies, they came hastily against their own kindred. He threatened that, with God's assistance, he would inflict punishment on them, unless they became wiser. But when he could not persuade them, he fought them with the forces he had sent for out of Gilead, and made a great slaughter among them. When they were beaten, he pursued them, seized the passages of the Jordan with part of his army that he had sent ahead, and killed about 42,000 of them. When Jephthah had ruled for 6 years, he died and was buried in his own country, Sebi, a place in the land of Gilead. After Jephthah was dead, Ibzan took the government. He was of the tribe of Judah, and of the city of Bethlehem. He had 60 children, 30 sons, and the rest daughters. He left them all alive behind him, giving his daughters in marriage to husbands and taking wives for his sons. During the 7 years of his administration he did nothing worth recording or deserving a memorial. He died an old man and was buried in his own country. After Ibzan died in this way, Helon succeeded him in the government and kept it for 10 years, but he also did nothing remarkable. He was of the tribe of Zebulun. After Helon, Abdon, the son of Hillel, of the tribe of Ephraim, born at the city Pirathon, was appointed their supreme governor. He is recorded only as having been happy in his children, for public affairs were then so peaceful and secure that he performed no glorious action. He had 40 sons, and by them left 30 grandchildren. He marched in state with these 70, all of whom were very skillful in riding horses, and he left them all alive after him. He died an old man and received a magnificent burial in Pirathon. After Abdon was dead, the Philistines overcame the Israelites and received tribute from them for 40 years. They were delivered from this distress in the following way. There was a man named Mano, a person of such great virtue that he had few equals, and without question he was the principal man of his country. He had a wife famous for her beauty, surpassing the women of her time. He had no children, and because he was uneasy at having no posterity, he entreated God to give them offspring from their own bodies to succeed them. With this purpose he constantly went with his wife into the suburbs, which were in the great plain. He loved his wife to the point of madness, and because of this he was excessively jealous of her. Once, when his wife was alone, an apparition appeared to her. It was an angel of God, resembling a beautiful and tall young man. He brought her the good news that she would have a son, born by God's providence, who would be a fine child of great strength, and by him, when he had grown to manhood, the Philistines would be afflicted. The angel also urged her not to cut his hair, and said that he should avoid every other kind of drink, for God had so commanded, and should be entirely content with water. When the angel had delivered this message, he went away, for his coming had been by the will of God. When her husband came home, the wife told him what the angel had said. She spoke with such admiration of the beauty and tallness of the young man who had appeared to her that her husband was astonished and beside himself with jealousy and with the suspicions stirred up by that passion. But she wanted her husband's unreasonable sorrow to be removed, so she entreated God to send the angel again, so that her husband might see him. By God's favor the angel came again while they were in the suburbs, and he appeared to her when she was alone without her husband. She asked the angel to stay until she could bring her husband. When this request was granted, she went to call Mano. When Mano saw the angel, he was still not free from suspicion, and he asked him to tell him everything he had told his wife. But the angel said it was enough that she alone knew what he had said. Mano then asked him to say who he was, so that when the child was born they might return thanks to him, and give him a present. The angel answered that he did not need any present, for he had not brought them the good news of a son's birth because he lacked anything. Mano entreated him to stay and share his hospitality, but he did not consent. Still, at Mano's earnest request, he was persuaded to stay long enough for Mano to bring him one sign of hospitality. So Mano killed a young goat and told his wife to boil it. When everything was ready, the angel ordered him to set the loaves and the meat, but without the vessels on the rock. When they had done this, he touched the meat with the rod in his hand. A flame broke out, consuming it together with the loaves. Then the angel openly ascended in their sight up to heaven by means of the smoke, as if by a vehicle. Mano was afraid that some danger would come to them from this sight of God, but his wife told him to be of good courage, because God had appeared to them for their benefit. So the woman became pregnant and was careful to observe the commands that had been given her. When the child was born, they called him Samson, a name that means one who is strong. The child grew quickly, and it clearly appeared that he would be a prophet, both from the moderation of his diet and from the permission for his hair to grow. Once, when he came with his parents to Timhath, a city of the Philistines, during a great festival, he fell in love with a young woman of that country. He asked his parents to obtain the girl for him as his wife. They refused to do this because she was not of the stock of Israel. Yet because this marriage was from God, who intended to turn it to the benefit of the Hebrews, Samson persuaded them to arrange for her to be betrothed to him. As he kept going to her parents, he met a lion. Though he was unarmed, he received its attack, strangled it with his hands, and threw the wild beast into a wooded piece of ground beside the road. Another time, when Samson was going to the young woman, he came upon a swarm of bees making their combs in the breast of that lion. He took away 3 honeycombs, and gave them to the young woman along with the rest of his presents. The people of Timhath, fearing the young man's strength, gave him during the wedding feast, for he was then feasting them all, 30 of the strongest of their young men. They pretended these were his companions, but in reality they were a guard over him, so that he would not attempt to cause them any disturbance. As they were drinking merrily and playing, Samson said, as was usual at such times, that if he proposed a riddle, and they could explain it within 7 days, he would give each of them a linen shirt and a garment as the reward for their wisdom. They were very eager to obtain the glory of wisdom together with the gain, and asked him to propose his riddle. He said that a devourer had produced sweet food from itself, though it itself was very disagreeable. When they were unable to find the meaning of the riddle in 3 days, they asked the young woman to discover it through her husband and tell it to them. They threatened to burn her if she did not tell them. So when the young woman begged Samson to tell it to her, he at first refused. But when she pressed him hard, fell into tears, and made his refusal to tell her a sign of his lack of kindness toward her, he told her about his killing of the lion, how he found bees in its breast, and how he carried away 3 honeycombs and brought them to her. Suspecting no deceit, he told her everything, and she revealed it to those who wanted to know. Then on the 7th day, when they were to explain the riddle he had proposed, they gathered before sunset and said that nothing is more disagreeable than a lion to those who meet it, and nothing is sweeter than honey to those who use it. Samson replied that nothing is more deceitful than a woman, for that was the person who had revealed his interpretation to them. Accordingly he gave them the presents he had promised, making prey of Ascalonites he met on the road, who were themselves also Philistines. But he divorced this wife. The girl despised his anger and was married to his companion, who had arranged the former match between them. Samson was so provoked by this injurious treatment that he resolved to punish all the Philistines as well as her. It was then summer, and the fruits of the land were almost ripe enough for reaping. He caught 300 foxes, tied lighted torches to their tails, and sent them into the fields of the Philistines. By this means the fruits of the fields perished. When the Philistines learned that this was Samson's doing, and also learned the reason why he had done it, they sent their rulers to Timnath and burned his former wife and her relatives, who had been the cause of their misfortunes. After Samson had killed many of the Philistines in the plain country, he lived at Etam, which is a strong rock belonging to the tribe of Judah. At that time the Philistines made an expedition against that tribe. But the people of Judah said that the Philistines were not acting justly toward them by inflicting punishments on them while they were paying tribute, and doing this only because of Samson's offenses. The Philistines answered that if the people of Judah did not want to be blamed themselves, they must deliver Samson up and put him into their power. So the men of Judah, wishing not to be blamed themselves, came to the rock with 3,000 armed men. They complained to Samson about the bold insults he had made against the Philistines, who were men able to bring calamity on the whole nation of the Hebrews. They told him they had come to take him, deliver him to the Philistines, and put him in their power, and they asked him to bear this willingly. When Samson received their sworn assurance that they would do him no harm except to deliver him into the hands of his enemies, he came down from the rock and put himself into the power of his countrymen. Then they bound Samson with 2 cords and led him away to deliver him to the Philistines. When they came to a certain place, now called the Jawbone because of the great action Samson performed there, though formerly it had no particular name, the Philistines, who had pitched their camp not far off, came to meet them with joy and shouting, as if they had done a great thing and gained what they wanted. But Samson broke his bonds apart, picked up the jawbone of an ass that lay at his feet, and fell upon his enemies. Striking them with the jawbone, he killed 1,000 of them and put the rest to flight in great disorder. After this slaughter, Samson became too proud of what he had done. He said that it had not happened by God's assistance, but that his success should be credited to his own courage. He boasted that it was from dread of him that some of his enemies had fallen, and the rest had run away when he used the jawbone. But when a great thirst came upon him, he realized that human courage is nothing. He testified that everything must be ascribed to God, and begged him not to be angry at anything he had said, nor to give him up into the hands of his enemies, but to help him in his distress and deliver him from the misfortune he was under. God was moved by his prayers, and caused a plentiful fountain of sweet water to rise at a certain rock. Because of this, Samson called the place the Jawbone, and it is called that to this day. After this fight, Samson held the Philistines in contempt. He came to Gaza and lodged in a certain inn. When the rulers of Gaza were informed that he had come there, they seized the gates and placed men in ambush around them, so that he could not escape without being seen. But Samson knew of their plans against him. About midnight he rose, ran with force upon the gates, together with their posts, beams, and the rest of their wooden fittings, carried them away on his shoulders, and bore them to the mountain above Hebron, where he laid them down. At length, however, Samson transgressed the laws of his country, changed his own regular way of living, and imitated the strange customs of foreigners. This was the beginning of his miseries. He fell in love with a woman who was a harlot among the Philistines. Her name was Delilah, and he lived with her. Those who administered the public affairs of the Philistines came to her, and by promises, induced her to learn from Samson the cause of his strength, by which he had become unconquerable to his enemies. So, when they were drinking and conversing together in the same way as usual, she pretended to admire the deeds he had done and contrived by subtlety to draw out of him the means by which he so greatly surpassed others in strength. Samson, wishing to deceive Delilah, for he had not yet lost his senses, answered that if he were bound with 7 greenwiths of a vine, still flexible enough to be twisted, he would be weaker than any other man. The woman said no more at that time, but told this to the rulers of the Philistines and hid some soldiers in ambush inside the house. When Samson was overcome with drink and asleep, she bound him as tightly as possible with the withes. Then waking him, she told him that some of the people were upon him. But he broke the withes and made ready to defend himself, as if people really were upon him. In the continual conversation Samson had with her, this woman pretended to be deeply hurt that he had so little confidence in her affection that he would not tell her what she wanted to know, as though she would not conceal what she knew it was in his interest to keep hidden. Yet he deceived her again and told her that if they bound him with 7 cords, he would lose his strength. When she did this and gained nothing, he told her a third time that his hair should be woven into a web. But when doing this still did not reveal the truth, at last Samson, because of Delilah's pleading, and because he was doomed to fall into some affliction, desired to please her. He told her that God cared for him, that he had been born by God's providence, and that this was why he allowed his hair to grow. God had commanded him never to cut his head, and therefore his strength depended on the growth and continuation of his hair. When she had learned this much, and had deprived him of his hair, she delivered him to his enemies. He was no longer strong enough to defend himself against their attempts on him. So they put out his eyes, bound him, and had him led about among them. In the course of time Samson's hair grew again. There was a public festival among the Philistines, when the rulers and the most eminent people were feasting together. The room where they were had its roof supported by 2 pillars. They sent for Samson, and he was brought to their feast so they could insult him while they drank. He thought it would be one of the greatest misfortunes, if he could not take revenge when he was insulted in this way. So he persuaded the boy who led him by the hand that he was tired and wanted to rest, and asked him to bring him near the pillars. As soon as Samson came to them, he rushed against them with force and overthrew the house by overthrowing its pillars. 3,000 men were in it, and they were all killed, Samson with them. Such was the end of this man, after he had ruled over the Israelites for 20 years. He deserves to be admired for his courage, strength, and greatness of soul at his death, and because his wrath against his enemies went so far that he died with them. As for his being ensnared by a woman, that should be ascribed to human nature, which is too weak to resist temptations to that sin. But we ought to bear witness that in all other respects he was a man of extraordinary virtue. His kindred took away his body and buried it in Sarasat, his own country, with the rest of his family.
And there we will pause. In the rubble of the Philistine temple, with Samson dead among the enemies, he pulled down with him a deliverer who freed no one but himself, and only in dying. The age of the strong judges is spent. What the nation needs now is not another strongman, but a different kind of leader, entirely a prophet, and a settled word from God. Next time, in part 4, the close of Book 5, a gentler story to begin Ruth and the kindness of Boaz, then the birth of Samuel and his calling in the night, and the dark day the ark of God itself was carried off by the Philistines, and orderly fell. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.